Today, as our gospel reading, you get Jesus' hardest parable, Jesus' most difficult parable, and somehow it ties in nicely with the Gene Barker theme that we are celebrating on this day. And so listen to what the Spirit might speak into your life in this indeed very troubling and difficult reading from Luke chapter 16 and verses 1 through 13. Have you guessed yet which parable this is? Luke 16 at verse 1. Listen for God's word to you. Then Jesus said to the disciples, "There was a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought against the manager that he was squandering the rich man's money. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager anymore.' Then the manager said to himself," I love this line, "Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am too proud to beg. I have decided what to do, so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked them, 'How much do you owe, my master?' He answered him, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' And he replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of the light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in very little is faithful also in much. And whoever is dishonest in very little is dishonest also in much. If then you who have not been faithful with dishonest wealth, who will entrust you with true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." May God bless to our understanding this reading from God's holy word, and to God's name be glory and praise. Amen. Whoever is faithful in very little is also faithful in much, and whoever is dishonest in just a little bit is also dishonest in much. This makes me think of many years ago, long before I had kids. Many years ago, a coworker came into work with a cast on her arm, and I asked her what happened. She had swerved her car and driven it into a tree so as not to run over a squirrel. And I thought, that is the kind of person you want babysitting your kids. Someone gentle, someone who will take it for the team, someone who is gentle in little will be gentle in much. Basically, if you wouldn't steal $5, you probably wouldn't steal $500. Because we are guided by our characters and not solely by our circumstances. Our same enduring character will guide us despite our circumstances, though there are surely times when we act out of character from time to time, when things like suffering or poverty cause us to do things we wouldn't normally do. But it's a pretty good rule that if a person can be trusted to act with integrity in the little stuff, you can almost certainly trust them to act with integrity in the big stuff. It's almost too bad that we had to slog through Jesus' most perplexing and least beloved parable in order to get to this gem of eternal truth. And as I think about Gene Barker on this Sunday, in which we remember her, the mother of our congregation, I am thinking of the many little unseen ways in which she made us into the congregation that we are. Faithfulness is the true greatness. We get it all wrong. We think greatness is being known, being seen, having money, having power, being recognized, having a household name. No. Greatness is being faithful. Jean Barker, for those of you who didn't know her, was the original founding member of this church. We say that she was the wife of our founding pastor, but that does not do justice to what she was and is in the life and history of this congregation. And surely the pastor always gets more credit than his wife, but she did a lot, maybe almost as much, in creating this church. When you join a church, you are assigned a number. Now, you don't have to know your number. It's not your Social Security number. It's your church member number. And if you leave a church and come back to it, you get your old number back so that we know exactly how many people have gone through the church. We don't want to reissue a new number to the same person. And so when Jean Barker came back to us in, I think, 2012, she was given her old original church member number, which was 0001. She was member number 1, the very first member of this church. And you never would have known it. She sat beside Mary Good every single Sunday because toward the end, Mary was actually bringing her to church. She did not like to call attention to herself. She was a quiet presence, sitting about as close to the front as anybody does, aside from weddings and funerals. She was faithful here every week without fail, toward the end, with the aid of Mary Good. And when Mary drove her, Mary told me this, when Mary drove her to the church on Sunday mornings, every time the steeple came into view, she would say, "There it is." I visited Jean shortly after her husband, our founding pastor, the Reverend Bill Barker, died, and Jean moved to Providence Point. She asked me if I drank coffee. I said yes. She took a chilled Starbucks Frappuccino out of the refrigerator, poured it into a coffee mug, and put it in the microwave. Ever the practical soul. Then we sat at the coffee table and talked about her life. I couldn't help but notice that she had a copy of one of my favorite books on her coffee table. And I have inflicted this book on you from time to time. It is the 1946 Book of Common Worship of the Presbyterian Church, the one with the flowery Elizabethan language. It was never a big hit when I have used it in worship. She used it for daily prayer every single day, morning and evening. She was the daughter of a pastor, the wife of a pastor, and the father of a pastor. And I don't know, was her brother a pastor? No. Okay, so she wasn't the sister of a pastor. Being a pastor's wife is a role that has changed greatly down through the years. Back in the day, a pastor's wife was an unpaid employee who was expected to do many, many things. Jean told me on the first time I visited her, "I feel like Rip Van Winkle. I feel like I woke up here all these years later," but she deeply loved being back at this church, coming full circle in a way. Before her wedding, which was 1949, 1950, before her wedding, she and her bridesmaids drove out to the old location of the old church, which was at Parkview and Bower Hill. There's a house there now. And they came out before the wedding to look at the site where the church would be built, where they would be investing their lives. And the church, when they built it, well, when they moved an army building up here to use as a church, it was nothing but a boxy little sanctuary, so that the elders and the deacons and the trustees, which were all separate back in those days, when they had their meetings, they had to meet in their tiny little apartment, which is in an apartment building that's still there on Beverly. And they had small children in the home, but back in those days, everybody smoked. Can you even imagine going to a deacon's meeting and lighting up? And she hated it, but she opened the windows after they left. They had an old pump organ at that little church back in those days, which two little boys had to pump whenever they were playing songs, until they got modern and got the idea to attach a vacuum cleaner to it, which probably made as much noise as the organ. She sang in the first choir. She organized the Ladies' Aid Society with the help of her own mother. She entertained all the new members in her home, and she worked just as hard as any pastor, at least any 21st century pastor. Jean built this church quietly, in the background, doing everything short of standing in the pulpit. And as she told me about those long ago days, she remembered everybody's names, as if I might know them. In an interview for our 50th anniversary, this is our 75th that we're celebrating now. In 2000, she said, "I think the church grew so fast because people were just curious. They didn't believe that two kids could start a church." It's amazing. She was starting a marriage and a family and a household all at the same time. And she told me about her trips to Thailand and Hong Kong and Singapore and Puerto Rico, where she was expected to feed everyone by butchering live chickens, trying to remember how her grandmother used to do it to get the feathers off, in addition to leading Bible school with lessons and crafts and games for Spanish-speaking children. When Bower Hill became active in the civil rights movement and Bill was in Selma, she anxiously sat in front of the TV with her ironing to watch events, hoping he was safe. Racists used to call their home and spew invective, her word, not mine, at whoever picked up, attacking them for standing with the black community. I felt humbled and grateful as I listened to the stories, because truly my ministry has never been that hard, even as a pastor, much less the spouse of a pastor. All the unexpected tasks she undertook with humility and grace, and no complaints that I could hear. Like I said, we often called Jean the wife of our founding pastor, but she was more than that. She took few bows, but she co-created this church, and her character kind of seeped into it. Work hard, get things done, be faithful. Establishing us as a church that cares not only about the next world, but about this one that we've got right here. Greatness consists of being faithful in 1,000 little ways. It's about a person's character, not their power, not their money, not their fame. Today we come across, as I said, the most perplexing parable of Jesus. He seems to be congratulating a fellow who has been caught basically embezzling. And here in Luke, none of you even smiled at this, but I thought it was funny. Where the guy who gets caught has the self-awareness to say, what am I going to do? Now that I'm losing my job, I'm too weak to dig, and I'm too proud to beg. I thought it was funny. I love the self-awareness. I will go into this parable saying that it's a mistake to always assume that the powerful person in the parable is God. What if the powerful person in this parable is another villain? What if it's not God? This odd parable could be a morality tale about how wealth corrupts both the shifty boss and the shifty employee. Readers have been debating this story's meaning for centuries. And we all know that Jesus is no fan of wealth. He seems to be implying that it's all dirty. Instead of attempting to unravel this ancient mystery, let's focus on its conclusion. Whoever is faithful in the little things is going to be faithful in the big things. And whoever is unfaithful, whoever is dishonest in little ways, is going to be unfaithful in big ways. Have you not found this to be true? And why do we never learn the lesson? We never seem to learn. The person who keeps your little secrets is going to keep your big secrets. The dishonest lawyer is going to be a dishonest politician. The egotistical boss will make a tyrannical king. You can make the fox your guard dog, but don't be surprised when hens go missing. Somehow, we keep missing out on this lesson, as obvious as it should be. A phenomenon that I have noticed since I began working with the church at the age of 25, that's 35 years? I'm not going to do the math right now. That was a long time ago. A phenomenon I have noticed working for the church is this. There's usually a man out front who's in charge, and I'm not saying this was the case with the Barkers. I'm talking about the church. There's usually a man out front taking the bows, and he's in charge, and then there's a woman in the back office scurrying around making sure everything happens, carrying out all the plans, managing the staff and the budget and the buildings. I've seen that in institutions of the church. It was true when I worked at there are people who know it now, I won't say it, a certain conference center of the Presbyterian Church where the male pastor would sit in his office and balance an ostrich feather upright on the palm of his hand. He was very good at it. While his stressed out, overworked female admin did all the work. It was the case in Cameroon when I was a so-called missionary there. They put me, of all people, in charge of the money. The money. But it was my secretary who had to do all the work because I didn't know anything about money. I sat in my big office and graded papers. I'm certainly not, as I said, suggesting that this was the case with Bill and Jean Barker. Bill worked harder than any 21st century pastor, though Jean too was expected to work and without pay. Women are now, and have always been, undervalued in our society. We need to name that. Women have always been undervalued. Their rights still vary from state to state, though a man's rights are the same. Their contributions are less celebrated. Speaking of my days as a so-called missionary, and I hated the word missionary, I thought it was very colonial. I saw this phenomenon when I was in Cameroon. I knew about a dozen elderly, single American ladies who went to Africa as missionaries in their 20s and who were still there in the 90s, 40 years later. Think of like Kate Fletcher types, speaking the local language like natives, running their small fiefdoms of clinics or schools or whatever you have, orphanages in the bush. In our day, these women could have been pastors. They could have been stated clerks of presbyteries. They could have been moderators of the General Assembly. But in the 1950s, the only thing they were allowed to do was be missionaries. And yet they're the ones that live on in local legend over there. Like most of the nuns that I have known, and I love nuns. I have never known a nun I did not like. Like most of the nuns I have known, they were the forward-thinking powerhouses who got things done, only to be forgotten outside their small domains. Haven't the best people been forgotten to history? Really. Truly great people, the really good ones, who never aspired to a position of prominence, who preferred maybe to keep a low profile. Haven't the best people been lost to history? The wisest, the kindest, the most accomplished, who went quietly through this world, blessing it with their passage, and then got welcomed surely into the arms of God with great fanfare in heaven, but no fanfare on earth. Greatness comes not in the ways that we think it comes. It comes not with wealth or with fame or with power, but with faithfulness in whatever we're doing, whatever endeavor we undertake, great or small. There are, I think, at least two messages here for us, and probably more. First, a person's character will come through in everything they do, every little thing. You can really know a person pretty quickly if you're observant of how they live. A person's character will come through in the way they tip the waitress, in the way they drive their car, and in whether or not they know the name of the person who cleans their office. their character will come through. A person's character will govern them, whether they're shining shoes at the airport or sitting in the Oval Office. Greatness means being a person of good character. Secondly, we become people of good character because it is modeled for us. Oh, people can talk till they're blue in the face. They can tell us what's right and what's wrong. They can try to teach us good character, but nobody will have good character until they see it in another person. Character, like many things, is only taught by example. Our task is to be faithful, and that is our greatness. We have a model for faithfulness in Jean Barker, who achieved fame as Elsie Jean Platypus in the old Mr. Rogers show, though she hated the name Elsie, and though she preferred to maintain a low profile. Our character goes with us in every circumstance, great and small. One of the best things about church is that we can help to improve our characters by being regulars at church. You don't feel it happening, you might not even see it happening, but over years, it helps to make you a better person, and you go out and make the world a better place. And so today is for Jean. We give thanks for her and for all the ones who show us how to be faithful, and they are many, in little and in much. The only real greatness in this life is in how we do the small things. Faithfulness is greatness. Amen.